we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a layup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. The Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore collapses after being hit by a cargo ship. Emergency services find signs of a number of vehicles in the water. Police say no indication of terrorism. Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledges radical Islamists carried out a deadly attack on Moscow's concert hall, but repeated his claim that the suspects were linked to Ukraine. Turkey detains 147 people over suspected ties to the Islamic State in nationwide operations. Authorities carried out simultaneous raids in 30 cities across the country. China issues a strong rebuke to the United States, the UK, and New Zealand as they accuse Beijing-backed companies of a series of hacks on lawmakers and democratic institutions. The EU called on Facebook, TikTok, and other big tech firms to crack down on deepfakes and AI-generated content by using clear labels ahead of European-wide elections in June. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once said Joe Biden was part of the mishpacha, using the Yiddish word for family, to which President Biden responded saying, quote, "It's true that Prime Minister Bibi and I go back a long way." Clearly that bond is strained as the rift between the two leaders is now wider than ever. Netanyahu has scrapped an Israeli delegation visit to Washington this week. The visit was aimed at getting the prime minister to consider alternatives to a ground invasion in Rafah. Now the suspension of the meeting has put a new obstacle in Washington's way, and the U.S. has called Israel's decision both surprising and unfortunate.
So it is a bit surprising and unfortunate that they're not going to apparently attend these meetings because, as you heard the secretary say in Tel Aviv on Friday after he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli government, we believe that, number one, a full-scale invasion of Rafah would be a mistake. It would be a mistake not just because of the civilian harm that it would cause, which would be immense.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister's abrupt decision came after the U.S. abstained in a UN Security Council vote that demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the release of all hostages. The resolution was introduced by the 10 non-permanent members of the body.
Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/254 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstention. The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 0 vote against, 1 abstention. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2728, 2024.
Now, Washington's decision to abstain has clearly set off sparks with its closest ally in the region. Now, Netanyahu said the failure of the U.S. to veto the resolution was a clear retreat from its previous position and would hurt Israel's war efforts. The White House, however, said that the U.S. vote at the UN Security Council does not, in fact, represent a shift in policy.
Our vote does not, I repeat, does not represent a shift in our policy. We've been very clear, we've been very consistent in our support for a ceasefire as part of a hostage deal. That's how the hostage deal is structured, and the resolution acknowledges the ongoing talks. We wanted to get to a place where we could support this resolution, but because the final text does not have key language that we think is essential, such as condemning Hamas, we couldn't support it. Though, because it does fairly reflect our view that a ceasefire and the release of hostages come together, we abstained.
Still, Washington has been averse to the phrase immediate ceasefire earlier. It had even vetoed previous resolutions calling for the same. However, as famine looms in Gaza, there's been growing global pressure for a truce in the war.
Why has the administration blocked so many pretty similar resolutions in the past?
Because they didn't condemn Hamas. I've said that repeatedly.
This one doesn't condemn Hamas either.
Because they didn't condemn Hamas, and because they also just called for a ceasefire with no linkage to the hostages. This one, the reason why we can't support it but didn't veto it is because it does link hostages and a ceasefire, which is in keeping with our policy.
Now, in February, the United States moved a resolution at the UN Security Council, but did not call for an immediate ceasefire. In fact, that resolution instead mentioned a temporary ceasefire as soon as practical. Since the war began, the U.S. has vetoed 3 draft resolutions, 2 of which demanded an immediate ceasefire. In fact, just last month, Washington vetoed an Arab resolution that called for an immediate ceasefire. And earlier, the U.S. was also adverse to using the word ceasefire and vetoed measures calling for it. Just last week, for the first time in 6 months of the war, however, Washington proposed a resolution seeking immediate and sustained ceasefire in Gaza. This resolution was vetoed, however, by Russia and China, but it marked a further toughening of Washington's stance toward Israel. For months now, in fact, Israel has been defying Washington's call for restraint in Gaza, which has led to a public pressure campaign by President Biden. And now earlier this month, in an interview, President Biden said that Netanyahu was hurting Israel more than helping it. He also reportedly issued a National Security Council memo suggesting that military aid to Israel should be conditioned on the delivery of humanitarian aid. Now, President Biden has also issued sanctions on Israeli settlers as well. And the U.S. president running for re-election in November is facing mounting pressure from both allies and Democrats to rein in Israel's assault in Gaza. And shifting focus to Donald Trump now, it was a mixed bag for him on Monday. He received both a lifeline from the courts and a date for the first criminal trial ever for a former U.S. president. The twin rulings came roughly within an hour of each other. Judge Juan Merchan ruled that Trump's historic criminal trial in the New York hush money case will begin with jury selection on April 15th. The New York judge rejected demands from Trump's attorneys to further delay his trial, going so far as to even admonish defense counsel. The twice impeached ex-president denounced the upcoming trial and other cases as election interference by President Joe Biden.
It's all about election interference. This is all Biden-run things, meaning Biden and his thugs, because I don't know if he knows he's alive. And it's a shame. It's a shame what's happening to our country. This is election interference. They are doing things that have never been done in this country before.
Already, Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records to hide his former lawyer Michael Cohen's $130,000 payment to silence the adult film star before the 2016 election.
So we're going through this weaponization of our government to try and knock out somebody's political opponent. And so far, based on the polls, it's not working at all. The people understand it. We have a man who just ruled he'd like the trial to start in 21 days or something. And I don't know how you can have a trial that's going on right in the middle of an election. Not fair. Not fair. It's not fair at all. He knows that, too. He's a Democrat judge. He wants to do that because they're all trying to damage Trump as much as possible. It's having the reverse effect, but maybe someday it won't. I don't know.
However, for Trump, the more significant ruling may have been the New York civil fraud trial. An appellate court significantly reduced Trump's bond from nearly $500 million to $175 million if he can in fact post it within 10 days. Remains to be seen if in fact he can. It's a huge victory nevertheless for Trump that pauses the New York state authorities from taking steps to seize his assets.
We respect the decision of the appellate division and we will abide by that. We'll put up cash or bond very quickly, securities, cash or bond, whatever it is. We'll put it up very quickly and we'll win the case. I built a phenomenal company that's very low leverage, unbelievably low leverage, with a lot of cash, a lot of everything else. Why should I let a crooked judge make a decision to give $450 million that allows me to spend very little money on my campaign if I so choose? I'll be spending money on my campaign. I might spend a lot of money on my campaign, but I should have that option. A crooked judge shouldn't say, we're going to have you post a bond and take all of that money that I could be spending on a campaign or other things if I want to do other things. So we were gratified by the professionalism of the opinion today. I thought it was I think it's a very important opinion for New York, but the only thing that's going to really solve that problem is when I win, because you're going to have to win. Because no company is going to be coming to New York if I don't win that case. That case is a scam, it's a sham, and it's a hoax.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's social media company, Trump Media and Technology Group, begins trading publicly today on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Trump Media debuts with a stock price of near $50 and a market value of around $6.8 billion. After his appearance in court, Trump said Truth Social, run by Trump Media, is as hot as a pistol.
Truth Social is doing very well. It's hot as a pistol and doing great. And it's going public. And the New York Stock Exchange wants to have us badly. And I told them, we can't do the New York Stock Exchange. You treat it too badly in New York. We don't want to do the New York Stock Exchange. And the people at the Stock Exchange are very, very upset about it. The top person is mortified, can't believe it. He said, I'm losing business because of New York, because people don't want to be in New York and they don't want to go on the New York Stock Exchange.
Now facing a total of 88 felony charges in 4 separate federal and state cases, Donald Trump and his army of highly paid lawyers are employing one simple tactic. They're trying hard to run out the clock and delay court action until after the November election. Now, clearly that strategy has failed, as Donald Trump now becomes the first ex-president in U.S. history to stand trial in a criminal court. The trial in New York is expected to last approximately 4 to 6 weeks, with jury selection taking approximately 2 weeks. And in South Africa, the country is heading to general elections in less than 8 weeks. The polls are being touted as a historic turning point in the country's politics. In fact, for the first time since coming to power at the end of apartheid in 1994, the African National Congress, the party associated with Nelson Mandela, could lose a majority. On top of its list of woes is long-standing corruption. No surprise there. And the latest scandal involves its veteran leader and parliament speaker. The speaker's been accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes. Now, included in those bribes is also a wig. Yes, you heard that right, a wig. Our next report explains.
This glorious human achievement that Utatu Nelson Mandela spoke about.
South Africa is less than 2 months away from its next general election. But the future of the ruling African National Congress is on thin ice. For the first time since Nelson Mandela became the first post-apartheid president 30 years ago, the African National Congress, or the ANC, may lose power. Since 1994, the ANC has enjoyed nearly unshakable hegemony. It came to power with moral legitimacy, a readiness to govern, and a promise to bring in change. But today, it's blamed for poverty, high unemployment, pollution, and a list of other problems in South Africa. And on top of that list is long-standing corruption. The latest corruption scandal to hit the ruling ANC centers around the veteran leader and parliament speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Kakula. That's not all. The bribe also included a wig. Yes, a wig. South African prosecutors say Mapisa Kakula received 11 payments as bribes. This was over a 3-year period when she was defense minister between December 2016 and July 2019. They claim she sought another bribe of $105,000, but that wasn't paid. Mapisa Kakula was previously accused of taking bribes too, but a parliamentary investigation was dropped in 2021. She allegedly accepted $121,000 in bribes from a former military contractor. This was when she served as defense minister between 2014 and 2021 before being appointed speaker. The prosecutors say the case re-emerged after a whistleblower came forward last year. They say they gave her an opportunity to hand herself in at a police station and be taken to a court to be formally charged. The prosecutors even said they would not oppose her bail. But Mapisa Kakula denies any wrongdoing. The ANC leader has not been arrested or charged yet. Earlier this month, authorities also raided her home in Johannesburg and seized evidence. Amid the probe, she's taken a leave of absence for her role as speaker. The corruption case has added to the woes of the ruling African National Congress. Polls suggest that the party that once commanded 70% of the vote and was almost untouchable is expected to see its share of the vote drop below 50% for the first time. If that happens, they would need to form a coalition, something that the ANC has been wary of.
If you know what South Africa has gone through, coalitions will not work unless those coalitions are regularized. We've seen how nations that are administered through coalition governments also battle in terms of policy contradictions. And therefore, out of those lessons, our immediate bet is to win elections.
South Africa's second most popular party, the Democratic Alliance, says it could consider a deal with the ANC.
Well, as I said, it would depend which ANC you're dealing with and what their program of action is and the like. But as I said, after the election, we'll have to sit down as the multi-party charter, look at the hand of cards that's been dealt by the voters, and try and make the best possible play out of those. But as I say, my sole target and focus is on getting the multi-party charter over the line, 50% plus one.
ANC's reputation was tarnished by a stream of corruption allegations under President Jacob Zuma from 2009 to 2018, when South Africa is estimated to have lost billions of dollars. The current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, does not have a clean record either. He's also accused of graft and violation of the constitution. The country of 62 million people has been facing mounting and deepening socio-economic problems. The overriding sentiment is that the ANC has failed to improve the lives of the poor. In fact, some believe they've only made it worse with graft and mismanagement. Will politics in South Africa see a momentous shift in 2024? And will the African National Congress be shown the door?
And staying in Africa, the continent is all set to get its youngest elected president in Senegal. The unofficial results for the presidential election show that 44-year-old opposition leader Bassirou Diomaye Faye is leading with 53% of the vote. The ruling coalition's candidate Amadou Ba has already conceded defeat and congratulated Faye, who is backed by the former prime minister. Our next report takes you inside.
Africa is set to get its youngest elected president. Only a few had heard of him a year ago. And now, 44-year-old Bassirou Diomaye Faye is tipped to be the next president of Senegal. He was released from jail just a week before the election, and the president-elect vows to usher a new era in the West African nation. Provisional results show Faye received over 53% votes across 90% of the polling stations. The young leader is calling this the people's decision to break from Senegal's past.
The Senegalese people have chosen to break with the past, to give substance to the immense hopes raised by our vision of society. I hope that our vision of society has given substance to their aspirations. I pledge to govern with humility and transparency and to fight corruption at all levels. I pledge to devote myself fully to rebuilding our institutions and strengthening the foundations of our way of life together.
His political opponent and the ruling coalition's candidate Amadou Ba has conceded. Amadou Ba, the 62-year-old former Prime Minister, was backed by incumbent President Macky Sall. He received a little over 36% votes.
Congratulations once again to President Diomaye Faye. I wish him every success at the helm of our country. May God accompany him as he carries out his mission for the greatness of our nation and the well-being of our population.
Celebrations erupted on the streets of capital Dakar as reports of Faye's victory came through. The president-elect has been particularly popular among the young voters. 60% of people in Senegal are under the age of 25 and struggle to find jobs. Faye promised to dedicate more state resources to help the youth.
I say it's great because it's democracy that's winning. Everyone thought it would never happen. Today, if these results are indeed confirmed, it's Senegal that absolutely wins.
Faye owes much of his success to the backing of firebrand opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. Sonko was barred from running due to a defamation conviction. Both Faye and Sonko, former tax inspectors, were released from jail this month. They campaigned together to fight corruption and prioritize national interests. Their campaign received immense support as the Senegalese people were burdened under rising cost of living. It was further boosted by a police crackdown on opposition protests and fears of a dying democracy after President Macky Sall sought to extend his term beyond the constitutional limit. Sall wanted to postpone the elections originally scheduled for February 2024 by 10 months. This was vehemently opposed by citizens and blocked by the country's top court.
This election took place in a context marked by a pre-electoral crisis that cost lives, left many injured, and saw many patriots imprisoned. We intend to turn this page, to reconcile hearts, to reconcile the Senegalese people, and to set to work tirelessly to mark and realize the hopes raised by my election and the project I am carrying forward.
A peaceful transition of power after a period of turbulence in Senegal. It marks a boost for democracy in West Africa, a region that has witnessed 8 military coups since 2020. Many hope the vote will bring stability and an economic boost after 3 years of financial hardships and anti-government protests.
And finally, some news from the business world. After heavy scrutiny following safety incidents and manufacturing issues, Boeing has announced a leadership shakeup. Its CEO, David Calhoun, has announced that he will step down by the end of the year. Calhoun's decision to leave the company was completely his own. And not just Calhoun, there are other big names that will also be departing from Boeing. Stan Deal, Boeing's head of commercial airlines since 2019, will exit immediately. And Chief Operating Officer Stephanie Polk will take his place. The company's chairman, Larry Kellner, will leave after the company's annual meeting this spring, and he'll be replaced by the former CEO of Qualcomm, Steve Mollenkopf. Now, these sweeping changes in leadership come in the wake of Boeing's near-catastrophic incident in January when a fuselage panel on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 Alaska Airlines jet blew off in mid-flight. The incident sparked massive safety concerns, and Calhoun himself called the incident a watershed moment for the company. He promised that the aviation giant would emerge as a better company. However, the list of mishaps on Boeing's flights just continued to grow with other dangerous and embarrassing episodes. In fact, earlier this month, a tire of a Boeing plane fell mid-air after taking off in San Francisco. And in New Zealand, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner lost altitude mid-flight from Sydney to Auckland, causing injuries to multiple passengers. Now, Boeing has been facing massive turbulence for years now. Its 737 MAX jets were grounded for 20 months after fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019. And recently, it also faced intense questioning from other major airlines who had requested a meeting with the Boeing board. Now, Boeing's customers are also upset by the quality of the planes they are receiving, and they've raised concerns over the delivery of the planes that have been ordered. Now, throughout 2023, the aircraft maker was hit by production and delivery delays on its flagship 737 vessel due to manufacturing problems. And Boeing is also battling heavy regulatory scrutiny as well. U.S. authorities have curbed Boeing's production to just 38 jets per month until the company fixes its safety and quality issues. In fact, discrepancies were reported after the Federal Aviation Administration's audit found numerous non-compliance issues. And perhaps most serious of all, Boeing is under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice. The probe could lead to criminal liability for the aviation giant and could upend a deferred prosecution agreement that the company reached in January of 2021. Now Boeing has settled charges of defrauding the aviation authorities during the certification process of its 737 MAX planes a decade ago. Now, once known for its engineering excellence, Boeing is now facing mounting criticism with claims that the company has been cutting corners to keep operational costs low. And while the CEO, Dave Calhoun, is on his way out, his successor, who is yet to be named, will face major headwinds. A stunning fall for a darling of the Fortune 500 whose turnaround remains in question. That's our show for today. We certainly thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.
Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual. My name is Utsaf Parekh and here are the top stories of the day. The United Nations Security Council has finally adopted a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This was after the U.S. did not veto the measure. This marks a significant divergence in Washington's stance on the Israel-Hamas war. So far, the U.S. has unconditionally supported Israel, vetoing measures unfavorable to Tel Aviv. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has retaliated to America's change in stance. He cancelled a high-level delegation's visit to Washington following the U.S. abstention. In Jordan, police scuffled with demonstrators walking towards the Israeli embassy in Amman. They were marching in support of Gaza. The protesters chanted slogans and waved Palestinian and Jordanian flags. Meanwhile, the police tried to push them back from the heavily fortified